Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hope you're doing well. So let's continue my overall thoughts on studying the RadFem philosophy now for quite some time. And I'm blocked heavily by the RadFems, and no RadFem is willing to have like a live stream debate or a conversation, dialogue, discourse, nothing, right? So it's very hard to get them to respond, and they freak out and they try to dox, and so it's more productive if I just make the videos here on my channel and have you all comment and see and discuss this philosophy that is growing in the West and that is trying to make its way to the Muslim world. And being an American revert, I feel like I have a very unique perspective on it. And since my dad is a womanizer who has no problem with paying for women's services, and my mom, who was an escort and stripper, I have a unique perspective on this whole phenomenon, and I have rejected the Western standard and embraced the Islamic standard. So I like to break apart and analyze the American culture of the classic times versus modernity, and how Islam is superior to that. So, to continue, on the topic of objectification, RadFems feel, I have my notes here, that objectification is when a woman's physical appearance is emphasized over their intellect or agency. Now, it's hard because when we engage with other humans, our eyes see them before they speak, right? Okay, you're walking down the street, la-di-da-di-da, and then you see someone who's attractive, you're like, huh, you saw their looks before you heard them speak. So it's very hard to not look at beauty first, okay? Now, was a popular phenomenon in the past, in the 90s, of the dumb blonde jokes, and the lady who played in, was it The Dictator? Sacha Baron Cohen, he rides on a motorcycle with the female actor, I forget her name, but she's very famous for playing a stupid lady in movies, okay? So, but there's this phenomenon of celebrating the stupid pretty woman, right? Which people get upset about. But men themselves have admitted that they don't necessarily care about a woman's college degree. They mostly look at looks and hygiene and other factors. But also, a lot of men have argued now that going to college doesn't equal intelligence, and we know there are different kinds of intelligence, right? Now, a woman who's low IQ can produce low IQ sons and daughters, and this, can crumble your bloodline. So there's a balance, nonetheless. But the point is, women, you'll see them post thirst traps, but then say, don't emphasize my beauty over my brains. And you're like, huh? And again, they also get mad at the dowry system. Now, Islam has the dowry system as well, okay? The mahar. And I think that's a compliment. Now, there are some men who say, how you can get a woman to have a $1 mahar? And then there's some who even say, your mahar dowry is a McDonald's meal. And it's like, hey, now we're getting into muta territory here. But the point is that the dowry system, I think, complements a woman. Think about this. Roose Bolton in Game of Thrones, he chose a fat wife from Walder Frey's daughters and says, I paid her dad paid her dowry in silver, so he has a fat young bride. So he chose a fat woman who, got him a lot of silver. And I always thought that was a funny twist on the dowry system, because she was able to get married, and her other more attractive siblings didn't get picked to become the wife of the Warden of the North because they wouldn't weigh as much. So I thought that was an interesting ploy, interesting angle on the dowry system. which benefited the fatty versus the pretty one. But she got eaten by dogs. But the point is that the dowry system, I don't think, insults women. It's fascinating how women will say, oh, you get the bag, girl, get that man's money. So they glorify getting the bag, but they don't glorify the dowry system. Say what? How does that make sense? The dowry system is like you don't have to have intimacy and then get it, right? It's presented to you ahead of time, usually. Whereas someone who wants to get the bag, they usually have to put out, and they don't get a ring, and they get tossed away when they're done, right? And they say, oh, it's worth it because I got the bag. Ugh, I got the Birkin bag, whatever the heck. And you're like, okay. And so further, you'll see a stripper. She'll be like, oh, these men are paying me. They'll make TikTok videos of counting all the $1 bills and whatnot. And women will be like, yes, Queen Slay. You're getting it. You're scamming those men. They're losers. They're simps. They're pay pigs. That's glorified. But if a woman who is pure, she's got honor and class, and a man says, here's what I can afford, here's the dowry, to her, because, it's hers, the women are like, oh, that's horrible, because it puts women as economic assets. What's wrong with being an asset? Ask yourself that. Why do RadFems feel that it's bad for a woman to be treated as an economic asset? Do you want to be an asset, or do you want to be a liability? A stripper hoe is a liability. A pious, clean, classy woman who you gave a dowry for and who has honor, that's an asset. That adds to you. It doesn't deduct. It's fascinating how really stupid a lot of these RadFems are. They love to degrade themselves. They love to tear down the patriarchy. And I've argued consistently for years now that if we lived in a matriarchy, more women would be in poverty because, like, if I'm the female dictator, your beauty is not going to manipulate me. I don't care how attractive you are. I'll take your, if there's the punishment, okay, we're going to take your hand. Next, your beauty can't bewitch me. But a man can be bewitched. And I always think it's a clever line in Game of Thrones where Cersei tells Sansa that what's between her legs is something to be used as a tool of manipulation. She mentions how she can't seduce Stannis. She would have better luck seducing his horse. What is this truth that Cersei drops? Now, Cersei is aging, right? But Lena Headey is still attractive. But the point is that Stannis, the irony is he gets manipulated by Melisandre. But Melisandre's character, she is actually ugly. But she takes off her necklace. She's ugly and all weird, right? But she puts the necklace on. She's able to use her beauty. So, what does this tell us? In a fantasy realm, but that also is true. The witch knows, the red priestess, the fire priestess, their whole team of women know you have to be attractive in order to manipulate a man. If you're ugly, it ain't gonna work. You're a scary lady, they're not gonna listen. So, it's not bad that a man sees a pretty woman and wants to offer her a dowry. She's an asset, okay? It's embarrassing when men have ugly wives. They get embarrassed when they don't want to be seen in public. And you'll see the occultists like Shira 7 say, you want to be with a man who likes you way more, because he'll be able to do more for you and you'll have more power over him. And if your man, she tells the women, if your man doesn't want to be seen with you in public because he's embarrassed by you. So this also means, why do you have so many women stuck as the side chick? In the world that embraces monogamy, why is it that the women who are side chicks can't get the main character, main position, we'll call it? Well, they're attractive, but they carry themselves really bad. They don't have good manners, and they have a bad reputation. So they get used and tossed to the side. Now, a woman who's pretty, or even mid, but she has class, and intellect, she is worth the dowry. See, what's really even more intriguing is that when you look at what men will pay for, they'll pay for the escort, but will they wife the escort? Shows, no, not shows, it's a movie. The movie with Julia Roberts called Pretty Woman, that was a trick on so many women's brains. You just gotta be a pretty hooker and you're gonna marry that rich guy. He's gonna fall head over heels for you. No. Most likely you're gonna end up like an American Psycho. You're gonna be dismembered and traumatized. Right? It's not really a pretty end for women in that industry, no matter what you do. So my point is that you can be beautiful and improve your intellect. I argue for that. I tell women all the time, read, learn something new every day, perfect your skills. That's for your survival and your own mental health. I don't tell women to be ugly ogres, but I do think that women should be comfortable with who they are, no matter what beauty level Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them. And I also think that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests us with our beauty and lack of beauty. With your lack of beauty, will you be mad at Allah? Will you resent all His other blessings? If Allah does give you beauty, how are you going to use it? Are you going to use it to get money through OF? Are you going to thirst trap? Are you going to use it to cheat on your husband? How will you use it? Because your body is an amana. Your body is going to be for you or against you on the day of judgment. If you recall, different organs, different body parts will testify as to what you used to do. I hope I'm wording that right. But I remember learning, okay, everything you said is going to be laid out. Everywhere you walked is going to be laid out. How you use your body, you will be held accountable because the law is swift in accounting. So if you think about it, to not be super beautiful can actually be a blessing in some regards if you have a bad heart that would seek to use it in a way that's not permissible. Now, that doesn't mean you let yourself go. That doesn't mean you purposely harm yourself to do anything to ruin your beauty. But it also means you don't become obsessed with clinging to youth. That you enter that chapter of your life with dignity and grace, and that you're not going into massive amounts of debt in order to cling to whatever fragments of beauty you can because you're insecure about your aging process, right? So you're not asking your husband to take out a loan so you can go get a BBL and a facelift and some balloon lips, right? You're prioritizing your money where it should go and avoiding participating in interest banking as much as possible, right? And so it's hilarious. The RadFems will get mad at the dowry system because they say, they're treating us like economic assets. It's objectifying us, putting a price tag on us. But then when someone turns 18 and does an OF, they say, don't judge. You're a prude. You religious conservatives, you just are not comfortable with your own sexuality. You're bringing women back to primitive times. The hijab is a tool of oppression. But they don't see something deeply pernicious about a woman as soon as she turns 18, putting herself online like that, for $5 a month, degrading her value, right? Decreasing her chances of getting a good dowry, right? They don't see that as problematic. Because if I was to tell, if I want a woman to sit down and think, let's say you got $20K for a dowry. That's absurd. Quite a lot of money. But let's just do the thought experiment. You got a woman who slept with 50 men, who has images and videos of her doing adult content on the internet, versus a virgin or one who's had one husband and they got a divorce, or she's a widow, but she's classy, she's modest, she prays. Who is worth the $20K? Who is more of an asset to his reputation? Who is more presentable and honorable and won't detract from his reputation? The hot wings guy, the guy on YouTube who his guest eats spicy chicken wings? He was dating an adult entertainer, and people were like, I didn't know he was that much of a simp. Like, he seemed like an all-around good guy, but he's dating something like that, and then he got roasted, and that made a lot of people unsub from him, and a lot of people were like, yeah, I can't take a lot of what you say seriously now, because you've proven you don't have good judgment. Those women are recreational, and you shouldn't even be doing that recreationally, but why would you take those women seriously, you know? And then if you look at even in cinema, the Peaky Blinders main character, he has a friend who's dating a woman who used to sell herself, and he offers her money to do stuff, and then she tries to accept it. And then he has to prove to his friend that she's still about that life. She's for the streets, right? She's for the back alley. She's not wife material. See, the RadFems don't want men to have standards, but the RadFems themselves have a list of what they call red flags, right? And I always found that to be quite odd. It's a consistent pattern within them. So they don't want women to objectify themselves, yet those RadFems themselves, when a woman objectifies herself by her own volition, they celebrate it. It's really odd. So if a woman lets a rich man get it and she gets the bag, she's empowered, okay? But if a woman gets married and only sleeps with her husband and she saves her beauty for her husband, she's a pygmisha. See, the RadFems consistently invert things. And they claim they want you to be seen with your intellect, but this doesn't really mesh in the real world. You know, I want women to always improve their intellect, always be something going on with education and wisdom and knowledge. I love learning every day, and I'm going to keep on keeping on for as long as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lets me. But I do understand that some women, they want to sit in front of the mirror and beautify themselves for hours, and you're like, hey man, why don't you like go learn how to fry an egg, you know? But they don't want to, because life for a beautiful woman is on easy mode for quite some time, if she knows how to use that to her advantage. But she'll be held accountable on Judgment Day for the way she misappropriated her beauty. So it's safer and more sounder to take the Islamic route, which is preserve your beauty and cover it up and be modest and don't free mix and don't flirt with men and don't lead with your sexuality with the male public. Save it for your husband and learn the deen, improve yourself, take care of your children, take care of your family. That's your priority. Work on your soul, right? It's really a deep conversation. But again, they tried doing this advertising where they have like a obese person, and you're like, okay, you've gone the other route. You're promoting unhealthiness and degeneracy of a different kind, gluttony. You know, it's really bizarre. So the RadFems are a deeply confused group of people, and the dowry system that Islam has, I think, is wonderful. And it's up to you as a woman. What do you want to charge? What do you want to accept? What's appropriate for you and what a man can afford? And honestly, not every good man can afford a lot, so don't just think every good guy has a bunch of money to drop, because there's plenty of evil rich people. Come on now. And so don't think that money equals morality, but at the same time, don't sell yourself cheap. And there are a lot of men who, they want to give you a McDonald's meal so they can divorce you later and not really invest in you. And some do feel that a higher threshold of monetarily prevents a lot of unserious men from approaching. So there's a deep conversation to be had, no doubt. Okay, but just remember, the hypocrisy of the RadFems is you're oppressed if you save your beauty for your husband, but you're empowered if you give it to men for money. It's very odd, very odd. So don't follow the RadFem route. Stick to what Islam says, even if it hurts, right? It's hard for women to retire their beauty from the public sphere. If they've worn yoga pants and all that for so long, it's very difficult for them to then embrace loose clothing because they feel fatter. They feel less serious. They can literally feel the power, I think, draining from their body. Because I remember, I'll give you a story. Before I was Muslim, I was in the grocery store, and I needed to ask a guy where something was. He was a worker. So I couldn't find it. I was looking for something down the aisles. I'm like, where's this stupid sauce? I need some of these ingredients. And I asked him, and he didn't even look at me. He just kind of like checked me out. And like, I couldn't believe, like, he's like literally checking me out when I'm talking. And it was so weird. And you're like, hello. You know, like, he's not shy at all. I'm just asking where something is in the grocery store, and he literally can't control himself. But I was wearing yoga pants. You know, I was working out. And I'm like, okay, you know, I'm a bit of a hypocrite then. Now that I look back on that. If I didn't want him to look, I shouldn't have been wearing literal yoga pants that show everything, you know. Now that I'm in my Islamic era, that I'm Muslim, I don't have men checking me out. Nope. Nope. I just have some people who may look at me weird because they've never seen a Muslim in public. They've only seen him on, you know, TV or whatever. But that whole interaction is different. And I would argue that there's some bigots who will say stuff, but for the most part, men are more respectful. And I like that. And it removes the sexual aura. And now when I ask for something in the store, they look right at me in the eyes. Like, okay, I couldn't find the tahini the other day. And the guy looked me right in the eyes and was like, oh, we might not have it, might be out of stock. You know, and then I went down the seafood aisle and there was 4 jars over there. It wasn't where it usually was, so I was able to get it. So, because I was making the baba ganoush. And I needed tahini. So, I can perceive how when you cut off the beauty, the interactions change. The behavior changes. And I like that. But I get how someone will find it very difficult to not lead with that. Like Sydney Watson, Lauren Southern. These women, they've used their sexuality. And then, you know, for them, they call the hijab trash bags. And you're like, okay, so you're calling a nun, Greek Orthodox nuns wearing trash bags? Catholic Roman nuns trash bags? Oh, but it's their choice. So it's a trash bag based upon the fact if it's a choice or not, but the clothing covers the same circumference. You're a moron. You're not consistent in your ethics. You're just an Islamophobic moron. Because if you hate the hijab, you'd hate the Catholic clothing as well. So, again, what's fascinating is that what the RadFems fear most and what they favor. Objectification is unavoidable if you flaunt it. You flaunt it because you got it. If you cover it, even if you got it, that's more noble, I'd argue. But this is a very difficult thing for a lot of Western women to understand because they know on a deep level they have to be polished and primed and beautified and adorned in order to get men's attention at all. Okay? You know, they know that. This is why Instagram has so many women leading with sexuality, not with their brains. The women who show their body on Instagram, who objectify themselves, they get monetized sooner. They get way more followers, right? If a woman leads with knowledge, anything else other than her sexuality, she's going to have less followers. Which leads to women buying bots. Buying likes because they get insecure when they compare their account to the Thirst Traps account. Right? So, that's just the way the cookie crumbles. But don't think the dowry system in Islam is insulting to your honor. No, it isn't. Okay? Again, the RadFems don't have a good moral compass for you. They don't. So, brush them to the side. Don't even let them in your consciousness. Because they are highly irregular. And they're not even comfortable sometimes within their own skin. And they're a very odd bunch. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect the believers, help keep us sane, and avoid innovations and misguidance from the RadFem community. Like, subscribe, comment, join the blog, do it.